Battle Through the Heavens God, The Flame Emperor Chapter 176, Top 3A. The third person among the 5th class talented newcomers. Mu Feng. The old man in the tall building also spoke slowly. Mu Feng, who was standing next to Xiaoyan and Yuero, obviously expected it long ago, so he was not too surprised, and walked away gently towards the tall building. This person is actually the third among the 5 talented newcomers. I really can't tell. You can't look like a person. It's really amazing. There were also some envious voices around. Xiaoyan and Yuero also turned their heads at the same time. Xiaoyan was not surprised that Mu Feng was able to get this evaluation. After all, he and Mu Feng had fought in the underground cold pool. Although it was extremely short-lived, he knew that Mu Feng was well aware of it. Strength is not weak. As for Yuero, she was more surprised. This robed boy was actually the third among the 5th class talented rookies, which really surprised her. Xiaoyan, don't be too surprised for a while. Yuero didn't care about Mu Feng. After all, she just met him today, so she looked at Xiaoyan and said. Hearing this, Xiaoyan didn't say much. Don't think that Yuero is only the strength of the peak of 3-star Dode, but the inheritance rune on her forehead is quite praised even by his own master, the Golden Dragon King, which is enough to show that the power of her inheritance is no trivial matter. Why is this third place only a kid in the early stage of the 4-star Dode? With the appearance of Mu Feng, there were no shortage of sharp-eyed people in the square who could not help but be surprised when they found Mu Feng's strength. Some rookies with 4th-level talents also have the strength of the early stage of the 4-star Dode. As for the others who have obtained the 5th-level talent, they are all strong in the middle stage of the 4-star Dode, the powerhouse of the level, and the top 3 among the 5th class talented newcomers. Everyone on the square couldn't help but wonder, how can this Mu Feng be rated as the top 3 among the 5 talented newcomers, who clearly have the same strength as them in the early stage of the 4-star Dode? This thought was also in the minds of many people on the square. Go on, if you don't feel the aura on your kid carefully, it will become more and more like a ghost. The old man also spoke slowly. Mu Feng also grinned when he heard this. After all, his little tricks couldn't hide from these people. Go on, be careful when dealing with ghosts in the future. After the old man finished speaking, Mu Feng came back. Mu Feng also returned to Xiaoyan and the others. Obviously what just happened didn't happen. Comparing Xiaoyan and Yuero is also quite puzzled. The few people who came with them are now scattered everywhere. When they come here, they have to rely on themselves, so they have long since gone to form a gang. Only Yuero and Xiaoyan and the other did not go. Even if this Mu Feng was rated as the top 3, he still smiled at Xiaoyan, which was enough to see that he was someone who could make friends. What do you think? There was a beautiful woman on the square, wearing a long snow-white dress and long ponytails, which complemented each other quite well. In my opinion, although this person is a little weaker, the faint aura on his body shows that he is someone who has gone through a battle, and he is different from the ordinary person who are greedy for life and fear of death. He Wangxia also said. Oh, really? Zhu Zuqing heard the words, and the long whip that was slowly wrapped around his waist also appeared in his hand like a rope. I heard that the top 3 people are a bit strange this time, and the details are secret. I don't know too much, but this trial is related to this talent. Song Cheng also said with a smile. After all, he can stand here at this time. The 6 are rated as 5th class talented newcomers. Oh, Song Cheng, where did you get these information from? Yi Tian asked in confusion. Being able to stand here is enough to show that their respective talents and strengths are not weak, so it is possible that they should try their best to make friends. Naturally, I paid a lot of money to get it. Song Cheng also said that he was also quite distressed. The big price was spent, but the information obtained was so ambiguous, which also made Song Cheng quite distressed. I have long heard that brother Song Cheng has mastered first-hand intelligence gathering, and it is true when I see it today. Li Xian also laughed. I don't know who the first or second names will be this time. Luo Ming also said. With the fall of Luo Ming's voice, the eyes of the 6 people also focused on the high-rise building, because the old man also began to read the second place. The 5th-level talented rookie is second, Yuero. The old man smiled slightly after saying that. Obviously, this year's top 3 are somewhat different from previous years. On top of the jade slip, there are a few boys behind the second Yuoro, but the old man didn't read it out. When Yuoro heard this, she also smiled slightly at Xiaoyan, and then flew to the top of the tall building. I've seen Senior, Yuoro said respectfully. Hehe, get up, this old man can't bear such a big gift. The old man also said cheerfully. The people above the square saw the 3,000 silks hanging down from Yuoro's back, which was particularly moving under the breeze. In addition to her slender figure and beautiful accommodation, the people above the square immediately felt a sense of urgency. The feeling of being out of sight is like a fairy descending to earth. How is that possible? Not far from Xiaoyan and the others, the man known as Ma Ji also stared at Yuoro above the tall building with wide eyes, looking incredulous. Oh, Mu Feng, who was standing beside Xiaoyan, was also quite surprised. He didn't expect that this seemingly weak 3-star Do De Peak would be a head taller than him. Is it the second? I thought it was my turn this time. Xiaoyan also said in a low voice. Unexpectedly, Yuoro's status as the inheritor could only be rated second. What is this? 3-star Dode's peak strength is also worthy of this second place. Is this your black box operation, or are you old and confused? A person above the square also shouted, obviously dissatisfied with this kind of evaluation. That is, how can the strength of the peak 3-star Dode come from? Take this seat? Could it be that there is some shady deal? Some of the people watching the excitement on the square also roared with excitement. Most of them are first and second class talented newcomers, so this time they came to watch the excitement. So don't be afraid of how big this thing is. At this time, the pot was obviously exploded on the square, like ants on a hot pot talking non-stop, arguing about Yuoro's second moisture. Yuoro also looked down slightly with her eyes, and when she saw Xiaoyan's firm gaze, she also smiled slightly, obviously not taking the ridicule of the people below in her eyes. Humph! The people above the square were still cursing, but suddenly the old man above the high-rise building snorted coldly, and then said, Yuoro, yes, heirs. In just a few short words, the pot exploded on the square like thunder. Heirs. This is a name that everyone on the Suanling continent is familiar with. If the probability of a person becoming an alchemist is 1 in 10,000, then the probability of an inheritor is another 1 in 10,000. This is enough to show the harsh conditions necessary to become an inheritor. How can it be? This woman is actually the inheritor. He Wangxia and the other 6 also exclaimed. Chapter 177, The Inheritor and the New King. As soon as the old man said this, the whole square was suddenly silent. Countless people stared at Yuoro above the tall building with their eyes wide open, as if they were looking at the most respected person. They are very clear about the gold content of the 3 characters of the inheritor. Senior, I don't care about this, why do you? Yuoro also frowned slightly. She just wanted to join a sect calmly, and then practice until she can accept the inheritance, and then be able to help Xiaoyan. Although she didn't know why, Yuoro could vaguely sense that Xiaoyan had some not-so-simple secrets, which she knew from the inheritance mark on her forehead. Moreover, his father's injury was cured by Xiaoyan. Now, her family is under the management of his father, and she can be considered to have no worries about food and clothing. She wasted too much time before, and now she is in her youth, and she has time to pursue her own happiness. Hey, it's okay. After all, this kind of thing is also God's blessing for Suan 3 days. The old man smiled gratified after he finished speaking. I know your concerns. It's not good to reveal the identity of the inheritor, but what you don't know is that the identity of the inheritor is also highly respected by people in these 3 days of Suan, and the number of each inheritor is in Suan. There are only a few people and everyone is definitely under the attention and protection of Suandan, so you don't have to worry too much. The old man obviously misunderstood what Yuoro meant and hurriedly explained. Yuoro didn't say anything after hearing that. She's actually the inheritor. The commotion on the square seemed to be particularly high. Those present were all people who knew the value of the inheritor, who was comparable to an alchemist. The alchemist has a huge network of relationships, while the inheritor has strong strength and some unique means. Both of them have their own advantages, but if you want to become any of the two, without exception is extremely harsh. This woman could actually be an inheritor. The man who was called Brother Ma also shrank his pupils tightly, as if he remembered that he had been contemptuous of others just now, which made him sweat. Don't look at this Yuoro, because she is only at the peak strength of the 3-star Dode, but in a real fight, even those of the 4-star Dode have little confidence in defeating her, just because she is the inheritor. Inheritance. Therefore, the inheritors are some people who are born with some peculiar physiques or talents, so they are selected by the superpowers and have the opportunity to inherit the mantle of the superpowers. Although this opportunity is also open to 55%. The inheritor must have something left by the strongest person in his body, so as long as she is the inheritor, she has a power that cannot be underestimated. Because in addition to the power of their own cultivation, they can also borrow the power of the strongest. If she can be called the supreme power, her strength is at least at the rank of Doxian. That's a Do immortal. These ordinary in Doxian's eyes, are as small as ants. Therefore, even if the inheritors themselves are weaker, few people dare to provoke them. After all, they have some of the power of the strongest in their bodies. Although they are weak, they are more than enough to deal with them. Therefore, the so-called inheritors are people with extraordinary talents, and their potential is also powerful and terrifying. Once they accept the power of inheritance, and after the inheritance is successful, their strength will also increase terribly. Even if it is said to be true, then it will not be an exaggeration to fish over the Dragon Gate. A successor. I really want to try what kind of power this inheritor possesses. It should be a very good opponent. Huangxia also muttered to herself, her eyes full of fighting intent. Absolutely not. This inheritor is quite tyrannical, and now I don't know what kind of power she possesses, so it's better to be careful. After all, we may be teammates in the trials that follow. Song Cheng also said, "Cut, if you're afraid, just say it." Huangxia didn't show any affection, and directly broke down Song Cheng. Comparing Song Cheng, he was helpless. It wasn't that he was afraid of Huangxia. The trials had not yet started, so it wasn't worth exposing too many trump cards for this, but I had to say it. This Huangxia in front of him, even for him, is quite difficult to deal with. Puff puff. Zhu Zuqing on the side couldn't help laughing. Sister Xiaoxia, why are you arguing with them? They are all big men with big 5 and 3 rough. Zhu Zuqing couldn't help but speak. The 4 people beside Wen Yan also looked at each other, although it is true to say so, but is there anyone who said so? Huan Zhu Zuqing really has a personality who is afraid that the world will not be in chaos, but a few people didn't care too much. Hearing this, Huangxia also snorted coldly, then turned her head away and looked at the old man and a slender figure above the tall building. Let's go down. Seeing that, he also handed the token to Yuara, and then said softly, "Yeah." When Yuara heard the words, she ignored the thousands of gazes on the square. She tapped her feet and returned to Xiaoyan, and then smiled at Xiaoyan. Although she didn't know why, Yuara has blind confidence in Xiaoyan. Xiaoyan's talent will never be lower than her own. Next is the last 5th class talent rookie, and also the first among these 9 rookies. Xiaoyan. The old man above the tall building glanced at the jade slip in his hand and said, "On top of the jade slip, there are these boys behind Xiaoyan's name, 10th level soul power." Then the voice he was looking at sounded above the tall building with a hint of jest. Xiaoyan didn't act too surprised when he heard the words. He originally thought that he was not weak if he ranked 2nd. After all, Yuara's status as an inheritor was enough to overwhelm him. It's just that he was this first. This is also what he did not expect. Under the envious gazes of thousands of people on the square, Xiaoyan also walked slowly to the high-rise building. The person next to Xiaoyan called brother. Ma was also very shocked to see Xiaoyan, who was walking towards the location of the high-rise building step by step. What is this for? That Xiaoyan can't be him. The corners of the eyes of the man known as Brother Ma also twitched wildly. These 3 people who had just been underestimated by him were actually the top 3 among the 5 talented newcomers. Xiaoyan has seen the old gentleman. Xiaoyan also said to the old man when he came to the high-rise building. "Haha, the person Wu Zhang said was you, right? The soul power of the emperor level, because I don't have such a strong soul power. I really envy you young people." The old man also looked at Xiaoyan and said slowly, "The old gentleman has won the prize, but it's just a fluke." Xiaoyan is also not proud at all. After all, only he knows how many difficulties he has experienced under this powerful strength and soul power. This year's 5th class talent rookie has so much moisture. Is a mere 3-star Dode peak enough to win this first place? Ma Ji was obviously also shocked, and then said, "Oh, what do you think?" Xiaoyan also saw that this brother had some thoughts about them earlier. Chapter 178, Provocative. As Xiaoyan's voice fell, everyone on the square also reacted from the shock just now. They were shocked by the first place in the mouth of the old man above the high-rise building. After all, it was the first place among a few people, and it was enough to be called the king of newcomers among thousands of them. Its strength is also inevitable. It will not be weak. Otherwise it will be difficult to convince the public. The person known as Brother Ma is named Mark, a rookie in the early stage of the 4-star Dode, and the 5th level talent is also rated as the 4th level talent. Among the thousands of rookies, the 4th level talent is not as powerful as the 5th level talent, but there are only 100 of them. To be rated as a 4-star talent is enough to show that this Mark has a considerable strength. As soon as Mark's words fell, the people beside him were also talking in a low voice. In this way, many people in the square also reacted. How could this rookie king be a person at the peak of the 3-star Dode? How does this convince the public? The 5th class talent newcomers must be the newcomer kings here, and they must be stronger than them, which can convince them. Yuero is because of her status as the inheritor, so it is not surprising that even the peak of the 3-star Dode is not surprising. After all, it is rumored that the cultivation of the inheritor is quite difficult. However, this Xiaoyan is also the peak strength of the 3-star Dode, and he is also their new king. Some people in the square are inevitably dissatisfied. If you say that you are not convinced, it is actually because you are jealous of the position of the rookie king. Although you don't know the rules and rewards of this election competition, everyone with a discerning eye knows that since soon 3 days will do such a test, it must not be unintentional. There must be something alluring about the position of the rookie king. And the most important thing is that this rookie king is currently only a 3-star Dode peak. The peak of the 3-star Dode seems to be only a thin line away from the 4-star Dode, but as a 4-star Dode, he also understands that this seems to be a small level, but it is very different, so Mark dares to face Xiaoyan, a newcomer. The king's position was questioned. Although many people on the square have the strength of a 4-star Dode, there are still many people who dare not provoke. But this Mark didn't think so. Just now, he looked at the rookie king with bad intentions, and the rookie king didn't do anything. That's why he became bold enough to be like this. Because this Mark also knows that even though this shot is a hit, he is also a 4-star Dode, and he has the power to fight against this rookie king who is at the peak of this 3-star Dode. And once this early bird succeeds, then the title of the new king will be him. When the time comes to face the challenges of others, you can stay behind closed doors. This can guarantee his position as the new king. Just thinking about it, Mark felt that this was an opportunity given to him by God, and he must not let it go. This. Why is the strength of the peak of the 3-star Dode again? Zhu Zuqing also frowned slightly, and then asked puzzled. This person seems to have extremely powerful strength. He Wangxia also muttered to herself, because the long whip in her hand also made a buzzing sound, as if it was afraid of Xiaoyan. Although He Wangxia is belligerent, the girl still has a thoughtful look, so she also thought deeply. Looking at the high-rise building slowly exuding a harmless smile, He Wangxia seemed to smell an extremely strong aura of danger from under that smile. This Xiaoyan is not easy. He Wangxia also laughed, then her eyes moved slightly, and she said to the 4 men beside her, do you all want the title of the new king? Xiaoyan, who is at the peak of the 3-star Dode, you people in the middle stage of the 4-star Dode have a very high chance of winning. Miss, he is serious. The title of the new king is naturally earned by the powerful. Although this Xiaoyan is only the peak strength of the 3-star Dode, it should not be underestimated. Song Cheng also said. Hearing this, the other 3 also nodded their heads. The 6 of them are all in the middle stage of the 4-star Dode. When it comes to fighting alone, naturally no one can do anything about it. But they are not fools. Even the woman who has the status of the inheritor can only rank 2nd. Xiaoyan can rank 1st and win the title of the new king. Naturally, he must have a stronger background than the inheritor. Because the test before the trials is impossible to have half a point of moisture. This is jointly supervised by the 9 super sects, so no one dares to release water. It seems that some people still don't believe it. How? This Mark has the strength of the 4-star Dode in the early stage. The old man above the tall building also put away the jade slip. Obviously, he also deliberately did not read the small words of the 10th level soul behind Xiaoyan. After all, he also want to see how powerful this mighty soul power can be. Small idea. Xiaoyan also responded indifferently. Obviously he didn't take mark from the early stage of the 4-star Dodi in his eyes. Ha ha ha, how is it? Is the so-called rookie king just a guy who hides his head and shows his tail? Mark still insisted. Shut up, don't talk nonsense. Yura, who was on the side, couldn't help it, then stood up and said angrily to Mark Dai's eyes. Don't speak ill of him. Yura was also full of vindictive aura, and then walked towards Mark step by step. The crowd that was buzzing on the square was also quiet for a while, and then burst into monstrous laughter. Ha ha ha. This rookie king is actually protected by a woman, laughing to death. Why don't you go home and find your mother? The people above the square also laughed. Ha ha ha, Xiaoyan, did you hear that? Do you want to acquire the title of the new king under the protection of a woman? I think you should go home as soon as possible. Mark also laughed loudly. When Yura was just about to attack, Xiaoyan above the tall building also said, don't you just want to challenge me? I agree, you don't have to use these small tricks, I accept. Anyway, your challenge is just a matter of wasting seconds. I'm not ashamed to say it. I cut my tongue carefully for a while. Mark said angrily. Yura, who was on the side, also stepped back when she heard the words. However, Mark smiled brightly at this time. He said during the test that anyone can challenge someone who is more talented than his own level, as long as both parties agree. And as long as the challenge is successful, the title of the new king will also belong to you. And then Mark thought of this, and then he laughed too. The reason why he wanted to provoke Xiaoyan like this was because he was afraid that Xiaoyan would not agree. In terms of position, they will sit still and wait. Fortunately, this kid is still impulsive. Now is your chance. The rookie king? Mark's eyes were filled with greed. Sir, what are the rules of the competition? Xiaoyan also asked the old man beside him. Just don't die. The old man also said slowly. Mark, I accept your challenge. Xiaoyan also looked at Mark with a harmless smile on his. Chapter 179, Killing Chickens to Warn Monkeys, One Move. Humph, it's a mystery. Mark also snorted coldly, obviously not taking Xiaoyan's smile in his eyes. Success, this Xiaoyan is really stupid. Mark also secretly said in his heart. Xiaoyan was taken to Wujiang because his soul power was too strong, so he didn't know much about these rules, but Mark was very clear. Although Mark also knew that Xiaoyan could be regarded as a newcomer king, and he certainly had his merits, but he was also taking a fluke. After all, the gap between the peak of the 3-star Dodi and the initial stage of the 4-star Dodi gave him enough confidence. Moreover, as long as both parties agree to this kind of challenge, even if he defeats Xiaoyan and wins the title of the new king, it is still within the rules, so Mark saw that Xiaoyan not only did not back down, but took on the challenge. His smile was also a smile to be bright. Mark challenges the rookie king Xiaoyan, fight until the point is reached, don't let be killed. The old man above the tall building also slowly opened his mouth, and then his sleepy eyes slowly opened. Mark stared at Xiaoyan, and he had already made a decision in his heart. After a while, the battle would start, and he would use the fastest speed to defeat him with the might of a thunderbolt, so that Xiaoyan could know that this newcomer king was not so comfortable. Obviously, this Mark was also born into a not weak family, so he was like a young master, and he didn't think Xiaoyan would have any chance of winning. There's a lot of nonsense. Since that's the case, then let's fight. Xiaoyan also murmured, and then slowly floated from the high-rise building to the square. When everyone on the square saw this, although the newcomer king Xiaoyan with smile on his face seemed to have no vindictiveness, but this situation made everyone's back feel cold, and from the newcomer king's message on their bodies, they clearly felt a murderous aura that can only be possessed by those who have experienced life and death battles. That kind of murderous aura disappears without a trace, and it can only be possessed by people who have experienced life and death battles outside all year round. It's a pity, after all, the peak of the 3-star Dodi is only the peak of the 3-star Dodi. Mark apparently also discovered the invisible murderous aura in Xiaoyan, but he pretended to be calm. Then they all retreated consciously. setting aside a 100-meter circle for the two to fight. The collision between the Dode powerhouses, they are also clear, it must be fierce and extraordinary. This Xiaoyan is not simple. There is not a trace of vindictiveness spilling out of his body, but the killing intent on his body is extraordinarily dignified. This is clearly something that he is willing to possess after experiencing life and death fighting outside all year round. So this means that this Xiaoyan is either a waste, or if he is, very tricky enemy. He Wangxia also held the gorgeous long whip in her jade hand and stared at Xiaoyan with a smile on her face. He Wangxia is belligerent, but she is not as aloof as the other family's sons and brothers, living a life of fine clothes and jade food. She is also a person who has experienced life and death fighting outside. Naturally, she knows that such things as murderousness cannot be faked. That Mark is obviously a gentleman from a gentle village, and the confrontation between the two will only turn into a massacre on one side. Just as he Wangxia finished speaking, the pupils of the 5 newcomers who were judged to be 5th-class talents also shrank their pupils and frowned, obviously feeling a lot of pressure from this Xiaoyan. Do you think that Xiaoyan can solve Mark within 10 moves? Song Cheng also asked. Obviously, several of them can be evaluated as 5th-class talent newcomers. Although talent and strength are important, their eyesight should not be underestimated. 10 moves are too many. In my opinion, 8 moves are enough. Zhu Zuqing also smiled, not seeing such a powerful person in his sight for a long time. Today, your title of King of Rookies cannot be preserved. Mark stared at Xiaoyan and said word by word. For some reason, Mark actually felt a tinge of fear from Xiaoyan in front of him, but at this time, he also cared about it. Not so much, can only suppress other thoughts. Although I agreed to your challenge, since it is a challenge, you naturally have to show your sincerity, otherwise the challenge itself is unfair. I have no luck. Xiaoyan and Mark said in the circular battle circle. Oh, what kind of luck do you want? Mark said slowly. 10 million. Xiaoyan stretched out a finger and said coldly. You. Mark also said angrily, what exactly did Xiaoyan do, and now he has done it again? 10 million circles, so he didn't have it either. I don't have 10 million, but I have an emperor-level medicinal pill. How about taking this pill as a bet this time? Mark also seemed extremely impatient and said repeatedly by Xiaoyan's routine. Oh, what pill? Xiaoyan was also curious. Auxiliary medicine pill, Fengji pill? The user can greatly improve his speed. Mark also said slowly. How do you say? Are you still fighting? Mark also said slightly angrily. Okay, if that's the case, let's fight. But if you show such good sincerity, I will naturally show my sincerity. One move. If you can catch my move, Xiaoyan, the title of the Rookie King, handed it over to him. Xiaoyan's voice also sounded slowly above the square. Above the square, there was a sudden silence. This Xiaoyan. It must be too wild. 3-star Dode's peak strength, let alone one move, even 10 moves can't handle a 4-star Dode strong. Is this Xiaoyan fooled by Mark? Some people in the square thought to themselves. This Rookie King is really crazy. Song Cheng also muttered to himself. The premise of being mad is enough confidence in your own strength. He Wangxia also looked at Xiaoyan on the square with her eyes slightly. Yuru and Mu Feng didn't say anything after hearing the words, because they both believed that Xiaoyan was definitely not the type to talk big. Don't be ashamed. I'd like to see how you beat me with one move. Mark didn't get angry this time, but said plainly. As soon as the voice fell, the huge aura from Mark's body also radiated. The strength of the 4-star Dode in the early stage is undoubtedly revealed. Then, although Mark was arrogant, he was also worried that Xiaoyan really had some strange tricks, so the huge Douqi gathered in front of him into a powerful Douqi light shield, protecting him. As long as you hold on to Xiaoyan's blow, then the title of this newcomer king is yours. The eyes of thousands of people above the square all focused on Xiaoyan and Mark's battle circle. Xiaoyan, whose eyes were originally closed, suddenly opened his eyes. He was still 100 meters away from Mark. The next instant, he appeared at Mark's side with a speed like a shooting star, and then smiled at him. Put a palm on Mark's body. Just when Xiaoyan appeared beside him, Mark felt his head sink, and then there was some turbulence in the control of Douqi, which caused a slight deviation in the Douqi light shield protecting him. Puffed. Xiaoyan slapped out a seemingly simple palm, and the douqi light shield on Mark's body also shattered with a bang. Then, blood flowed from Mark's mouth, and he fell back. And fell into a coma after a distance of hundreds of meters. The audience was silent, deadly. Chapter 180, The Power of the New King. How is that possible? The people present also exclaimed. After Xiaoyan's attack, he retracted his hand and stood calmly on the square. You. One of Mark's entourage said angrily, and then saw that the people around Mark also fell and scattered. After all, Mark was injured so badly, too. Don't worry, he can't die yet. Xiaoyan also glanced around and said lightly. At this time, the square was also silent, because they seemed to have underestimated the new king before, and they never thought that the new king's methods would be so cruel. Everyone on the square looked at Mark, who was seriously injured and dying, and the newcomer king, who smiled as if nothing was wrong. They all knew it. No one dares to provoke this new king. Mark is the last warning? Kill the chicken to warn the monkey? Haha, this kid's soul power is so terrifying. The old man also spoke slowly. From Xiaoyan's shot to the end, it was only a few breaths of time. The crowd on the square hadn't reacted yet. Mark, who provoked the rookie king, vomited blood and passed out. In the eyes of everyone, this was originally a well-matched battle, and it turned into a one-sided massacre. Moreover, even some weak people on the square could see it. If the newcomer King Xiaoyan didn't stop at the end, then Mark would have only one end. Lost on the spot. Although this Mark is arrogant, he is also a real powerhouse in the early stage of the 4-star Dode, and this rookie king seems to be only the strength of the peak of the 3-star Dode. In just a few short breaths, one move instantly killed Mark, who was in the early stage of the 4-star Dode. Some people in the square who had the same idea as Mark were also secretly thankful. Fortunately, they hadn't been reckless before, otherwise they wouldn't have ended much better than this Mark. But now everyone knows that even if this seemingly weak rookie king only has the strength of the peak of the 3-star Dode, no one dares to provoke him at this time. This seems to be a simple battle, but the one who feels the most deeply should be the 6 newcomers who are also 5th-class talents. How is that possible? Zhu Zuqing couldn't hide his surprise, and his jade hand covered his lips slightly so as not to make a sound of surprise. This rookie king is quite amazing. He Wangxia also muttered to herself, but the long whip in her hand also exuded a warlike aura. Don't worry, there will be a day to compete with him. He Wangxia stroked the long whip in her hand, and the long whip seemed to have a soul and calmed down again. Although the strength of this rookie king is only the peak of the 3-star Dode, the real combat power is also terrifyingly strong. Song Cheng also spoke slowly. According to Song Cheng's calculations, even if his strength in the middle stage of the 4-star Dode can deal with Mark in the early stage of the 4-star Dode, it would take 10 moves to defeat the enemy. This Xiaoyan actually defeated Mark with a single move with the strength of the peak of the 3-star Dode, and even if he said defeat, it would not be an exaggeration to say that it was an instant kill. The battle between the two of them was too fast, and it was almost over at the beginning. From the beginning to the end, he could only see Mark covering himself with douqi, and then Xiaoyan attacked. The winner was decided in a few breaths. Xiaoyan was unscathed, but Mark was a little miserable. His whole body burned to varying degrees, and then a prominent palm print appeared on his chest, and the blood on the corner of his mouth was also slowly seen as he was seriously injured and fell into a coma. He had no doubt that if Xiaoyan hadn't shown mercy, this Mark would have been directly die on the spot. Brother Yi Tian, comparing Xiaoyan with you. Song Cheng was also facing Yi Tian Dao. It's hard to say. You know, you can't tell much from this blow alone. But Yi Tian also seemed to be hesitant to speak. Song Cheng also nodded when he heard the words, and then heard Yi Tian's follow-up, and hurriedly asked, but what? This Xiaoyan is very strong. The power of the soul is at least stronger than any of us present. Yi Tian's eyes showed a rebellious look, staring at Xiaoyan, and said word by word. How can it be? Yi Tian, you are an emperor-like soul power, if his soul power is stronger than yours. Li Xiaoyan said. Li Xiaoyan knew very well the strength of this Yi Tian person, although they were also in the middle stage of the 4-star Dode, but this when Yaishan's soul power was tested, it was close to level 9. It can be said that among the 6 of them, in terms of strength, this Yi Tian can definitely rank in the top 3. Strongness is strength. There is nothing to be dissatisfied with. If you are dissatisfied, practice hard and defeat it in the future. Yi Tian also said. When Song Cheng heard the words, he smiled gratified. This Yi Tian was as rumored, respecting the strong. Li Xiaoyan also smiled in agreement and didn't say much. It seems that the title of the new king is well deserved. The next step is to wait for the start of the trials. Luo Ming also said. Looking at the silent square around, Xiaoyan also calmly returned to Yuuru and the others. When Yuuru saw this, she didn't say anything, she just got closer to Xiaoyan. Mu Feng on the side was different. I can't tell, you are the new king this time. Didn't you hide it too? Xiaoyan also laughed, and Mu Feng said with a smile. Just now, Xiaoyan seemed to be arrogant, but in fact he had absolute confidence to say a move to defeat the enemy, and the battle just now seemed simple, but it was not. This mark is also a 4-star Dodi early stage strength. Mark's choice was correct at the beginning. It stimulated his own Doqi to form a Doqi light shield on his body, which greatly weakened Xiaoyan's strength. Attacking, so as to win him a chance to resist Xiaoyan's attack, but what he did not expect is that Xiaoyan's attack seemed to penetrate his Doqi light shield, and attacked Mark's body directly and viciously. Even if it is a Dodi powerhouse, not everyone has the same powerful soul strength and physical strength as Xiaoyan. Most of the Dodi powerhouses have almost the same physical strength as the Dodi on the Doqi continent. As for the soul in terms of strength, most of them are only in the heavenly realm or even lower. Unfortunately, this mark was one of them. At the moment Xiaoyan attacked, the huge soul power of the soul realm in the body exploded instantly, and then calmed down, and released Huang Quan's anger directed at Mark's head. And then this soul attack is the most deadly. Mark's tiny soul realm was attacked by Xiaoyan, and then Mark's eyes became sluggish for a moment, the Doqi in his body stopped flowing, and the Doqi light shield covering his body's surface was like no owner without Mark's control. Things were moving around, but couldn't stop Xiaoyan's attack. At this time, Xiaoyan's vindictive energy covered his palm and slapped Mark's body heavily. The terrifying flames were mixed with the scorching heat, which burned Mark's body to varying degrees, and Xiaoyan's palm attack was only slapped, without using Do skills at all. After all, Xiaoyan was also worried, although Mark was a 4-star Dode. But the strength of his background is not simple, if accidentally killed. So from the beginning to the end, Xiaoyan only used one move, then go to Huang Quan's anger. And in the end, if Xiaoyan hadn't withdrawn most of his power when he placed his palm on Mark's body, then Mark's current end would not have been so pleasant. Next, I'm going to announce the rules of this trial. The old man above the tall building was also talking.
Hi. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel and hit the bell icon to get updated on my latest video. Thank you for watching.